G'day, and welcome to the February edition of the Emerging Meta in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. You're here with the coach, and as always, this video is brought to you in partnership by AOS Reminders. I'll be using their data to deep dive into the most popular list choices during the month of February 2020. Emerging Meta is using predictive analytics to help you understand the trends that you are likely to see on the gaming table, and it's going to help you potentially incorporate some of these ideas into your own lists, and also prepare for what your opponents are going to be doing by exposing their most popular list choices. The data is generated by players like you who are using the website AOS Reminders. So without further ado, let's dig in and unpack what is emerging in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So let's talk February, let's talk about the game changes, and the competitive season is back in swing. It is going on. Lots of events have happened during the month of February. We've had Hammer and Bolter, the Prague Open, we've had the Sheffield Slaughter, we've had the Battle of Copenhagen, Element Games Grand Slam, the Dutch AOS GT, just to name a few. There were so many what's going on, which means people were building lists for Age of Sigmar. Not only did we have all these events happening and people putting their armies on the table, but we also had a new battle tome release. Well, it wasn't quite a battle tome, it's more of an expansion to the Chaos Realms, and that was the Wrath of the Everchosen, which released a whole bunch of new rules for the Chaos armies. On top of that, we had Tzeentch and KO, who not only got an FAQ, but they got an FAQ on that FAQ. So things have changed a little bit, and there's a little bit of clarity. So people who are building lists got a little bit of a tweak, and then it's been tweaked a little bit more. So lots going on in February, as well as some battalions actually got released in the White Dwarf for our Orc players. So during February, there was 6,435 lists generated in AOS Reminders. So of the lists that were generated, the most popular choices were the Stormcast Eternals with 493. We had the Ogre Mawtribes at 346. We had Nighthorn at 335. Slaves to Darkness at 333, Ossiarch Bone Reapers, KHORNE, Tzeentch, Cities of Sigmar, Kharadron Overlord, Skaven, NURGLE, Sylvaneth, Iron Jaws, Gloomspike Gitz, Flesh Eater Courts, Big WAAGH, Seraphon, Slaanesh, Fyreslayers, Deepkin. So the super interesting thing is that in previous months we've had some real people that have broken through the gates. You had the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, we've had the Ogre Mawtribes, we've had the Cities of Sigmar that have really broken the gates with some really high numbers of lists generated. You can start to see that now we've started to normalize. You can see that the list building is around the same. You know, we've got this big component of 350 to 250 kind of army sitting around that number. So the meta is slowly starting to even themselves out. However, as we know, coming up in March, we do have Seraphon and obviously the Wrath of the Everchosen. It may actually change and boost up a little bit some of these Chaos armies. A prime example of that, and we will look at this a little bit later, is NURGLE has started to see a little bit of a resurgence. They got some sub-allegiance rules in the Wrath of the Everchosen, and I've started to see a lot of excitement when it comes to NURGLE list building, and people are starting to think about how they start to tap into some of those great rules. And we'll get into that a little bit later from the Wrath of the Everchosen. So you can see that again, poor old Legion of Night, Legion of Grief, Legion of Blood, and Legion of Sacrament, and our Legions of Nagash book are getting a little bit left out here. Poor old Nagash has put all his focus on the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, and there are a few other armies that are sitting outside of here, things like the Beasts of Chaos. But let's dig in a little bit deeper to see how these lists are being built. So starting at the realms, as always, so people who are choosing their realm and where their army's coming from. Of the 7 realm choices available for selection, again and again and again, we are seeing that Shyish and Akshi are being the most popular list choices. Now, there's no surprise, they have really super strong artifacts that people are choosing. So Shyish coming in at 26% of all realm choices, followed by Akshi with 21.4. We then start looking at some of those. Gur at 13.2, Gairan at 12.4, Hish at 12.2. Then we start getting into some of those lower numbers, such as Shimon at 5.8, as well as Ulgu at 8.7. So we're starting to see that the realms right now are real stable. People have found the artifacts that are working for them, and as we get into the next page, you know, we are seeing some changes in the artifacts, but mostly there are a set of artifacts that are really dominating, and it's making people not move from their realm of origin. Something we've done a little bit differently this particular month. Well, actually, no, it's not even there. We'll get to that in the next slide. But what are the most popular artifacts that we're going to choose from this month? Well, you can start to see that some of these artifacts are still popular as always. The Gryph Feather Charm, Gaia Strike, Thermal Rider Cloak, Ignax Scales, the Rune Blade, Sword of Judgment, Aether Quartz Brooch, Ethereal Amulet. They are staples from the realms. But we've had some new artifacts that have come in that have maybe either being tested or maybe starting to increase in their popularity. So the Bejeweled Gauntlet is one, the Mirrored Cuirass is the other, and the Blade of Endings is the third. So who are these three new artifacts and what are they doing, and maybe do you want to start putting them into your list? So the Bejeweled Gauntlet, at the end of the movement phase, you pick an enemy unit within 1 inch and you roll a dice. On a 3+, you take 1 mortal wound. Not bad, not bad. The Mirrored Cuirass negates mortal wounds on a 5+, and on a 6, you pick an enemy unit within 6 inches and they suffer a mortal wound. So it's a little bit different to say the Ignax Scales, which is going to ignore mortal wounds on a 4+, but it does give you the ability to rebound mortal wounds. So that's not a bad little defensive option as well. The last new artifact on our list is the Blade of Endings, where you pick one of your melee weapons, and when you hit on a 6+, meaning you can bring that down, it's going to add 2 to the damage profile. So if you're looking to do max damage, that is not a bad little artifact. But again, as always, the artifacts still kind of hang around the same kind of theme. We've got the defensive ones that are still quite strong, the Ethereal Amulet, the Gryph Feather Charm, Ignax Scales, Doppelganger Cloak, and the Ragged Cloak. They're all different, and if you're looking for defense, again, whether it's from mortal wounds, whether it's making it -1 to hit, maybe you not being able to be shot at, there are a whole bunch of artifacts, and again, whatever suits your flavor and your play style and what your needs are. Movement is still strong. The Thermal Rider Cloak and the Hydroxy Skin Cloak. And then finally, we've got our offensive artifacts. As always, we've got the Gaia Strike, the Sword of Judgment, and the Rune Blade. Again, whether you're looking to do a whole bunch of mortal wounds, whether you're looking at Ren -3. Finally, the Aether Quartz Brooch is still popular. As always, if you're looking to farm command points, you want to keep those command points humming, Aether Quartz Brooch is for you, and definitely dominates if you're coming from Hish. So how do these new artifacts stack? Well, before I get into that, I did tease it a little bit earlier by mistake, but I will show you something that's new, and I'd love your feedback on this if you find this interesting, is which are the allegiances and where are they starting to come from? So what's popular? So you can start to see there is a whole bunch of different realms that particular armies are coming from. Prime example, we can look at Hish in the top right corner, which is the purple. We can see the Ogre Moor tribes, the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, and the Nighthorn are coming from that army. So a really good example is that the Ogre Moor tribes, they love the Ethereal Amulet on their Frostlord on Stonehorn. So you can start to see why that is a great choice. If you go down a little bit to almost the bottom right, you've got your Stormcast Eternals, your Iron Jaws, and your Legion of Grief. Now, those are the three armies that are really command point heavy. They love their command points, whether it's to reroll charges, whether it's going to be to stack on additional damage, a whole bunch of things that these armies can do. They want that Aether Quartz Brooch to be bringing back a command point on a 5+ when they spend. So you can start to see that when we look at the artifacts and what's being provided in the last slide, and then you compare it to the armies that are choosing it, the dots are starting to connect. Another one is Gur up there with the Gloomspite Gits. You can get a -1 to hit from the Gryph Feather Charm. That is a wonderful choice for your Loon boss on Mangler Squig. I used to like putting it on my Troggoth Hag or my Troggoth Princess, because that would make her a -2, and then with a spell I could make it up to a -3. So nice little appealing combination you've got there. But again, Gaia Strike from Gairan. Sylvaneth is the top choice there. Durthu is a strong build with Gaia Strike. But again, there's lots of different combinations, but again, what I'm showing you is that we can connect the dots to see why some of these armies and who's taking these artifacts and why they're potentially being put into these realms. When we look at the most chosen artifacts, the most chosen artifacts in the month of February were the Ethereal Amulet. I've kind of alluded to that already. We've got the Godbone Armor, the Aether Quartz Brooch, and the God Forge Blade. So 3 of these 4 artifacts that I've just named were very popular, and they have been popular month on month. So you've heard me talk about the Ethereal Amulet, which is going to allow you to ignore Rend. You've got the Godborn Armor, which is coming from the Ossiarch Bone Reapers through the Petrifix Elite sub-allegiance. So if you choose Petrifix Elite, and if you are playing Ossiarch Bone Reapers not right now, 99.99999% of armies are coming from Petrifix Elite, so you're forced to take that artifact. The Aether Quartz Brooch I've already mentioned is popular for the command points. And then finally you've got the God Forged Blade, which is coming to you from the Stormcast Eternals. If you take the Hammers of Sigmar sub-allegiance, which is that tier just under taking the Stormcast Eternals, I want to come from that chamber, which is the Hammers of Sigmar. What that artifact, you are forced to take this artifact, and what the God Forged Blade does is it upgrades one of your hero's melee weapons to basically, if you roll a hit roll of 6+, you get +1 damage. Now there's some other great artifacts there. You can see we've talked already about the Thermal Rider Cloak, the Groove Feather Charm, the Ignax Scales on the right hand side, all coming from Malign Sorcery. But you do see some other allegiance based artifacts that are sitting in people's battle tomes that are becoming quite popular. So the Soul Thief from the Stormcast Eternals, the Brandis Fard and the Splatter Cleaver, again from the Ogre Moor tribes. They continue month on month to be in this list. The Tyrant Slayer from the Fyreslayers. You've got the Frozen Colonel from the Sylvaneth. You've got the Shroud of Warpfire from Tzeentch. So Tzeentch is a new book, so this artifact has risen from the Battle Tome, and this seems like a great choice right now. You've got the Beacon of Nagashazar from the Nighthaunt. You've got the Incandescent Rectress from Seraphon. However, we do know that Seraphon's got a new battle tome literally around the corner, so who knows what the impacts are going to be, and if artifacts and war scrolls are being rewritten. So stay tuned, but that one is still popular. The Sunblessed Armor, which is coming from the Iron Jaws, and I believe that's coming from a sub-allegiance from memory. You've got the Wither Stave from NURGLE. You've got the Staff of Ocular Optimization, as well as the Breath of Morgrim coming from the Caradron Overlord. So again, new battle tome. These two are currently the popular ones. And then finally the Skull Shard Mantle coming from KHORNE. So that makes up our top 20 artifacts chosen in the month of February. When we drill down a little bit further into Malign Sorcery artifacts to see what people can choose out of all of them that are available, you can see the Ethereal Amulet, the Aether Quartz Brooch, the Thermal Rider Cloak, and the Groove Feather Charm are the top 4 artifacts that are available to everybody through Malign Sorcery. So who's taking the Ethereal Amulet? So again, no surprises. The top 3 are the Ogre Moor tribes with 30.6%. Ironjaw's taking it at 9.9, and the Big WAAGH taking it at 8.6. So you can only imagine that Maw Crushers and Stonehorns are great recipients of the Ethereal Amulet. So many of those particular beasts have a natural 3+ armor save. So by ignoring Rend, all of a sudden that makes him a very potent combat beast, unless you've got a whole bunch of mortal wounds to take it down. You've got the Aether Quartz Brooch coming in, with the top 3 coming from the Legions of Grief, the Iron Jaws, and the Nighthaunt. Again, very command point heavy armies for different reasons. The Iron Jaws, for example, love their Big WAAGH, and they love to do their charging, so they love having 2 to 3 command points up their sleeve to guarantee they get to do max damage. The Thermal Rider Cloak is coming in for Slaanesh. So Thermal Rider Cloak's going to let you fly, which is a great ability. So nothing scares me more than a flying Keeper of Secrets that can jump over my screen of battle line and then jumps into that nice juicy target that I'm trying to protect. So Slaanesh coming in almost at 50% of the choices of Thermal Rider Cloak, as well as the Ogre Moor tribes, as well as the cities of Sigmar. I know personally the Thermal Rider Cloak has recently gone onto my Hurricanum, because I want to be able to jump over my screens to follow around my army. So that's just one of many use cases in the cities of Sigmar. Finally, the Groove Feather Charm was the 4th most popular choice from Malign Sorcery. and it was chosen by the Gloomspite Gits at 29.8%, the Seraphon at 14.4%, and then finally the Flesh Eater Courts at 12.5%. So causing that -1 to hit is very, very, very powerful. I can see it on Ghoul Kings, on Terrorgeist, I can see them on Slann Mage Priests, and I can see them, as I mentioned earlier, on things like the Loon Boss on the Mangler Squig. The most chosen endless spells in the month of February were again the Balewind Vortex, the Chronomatic Cogs, the Bone-Tide Shrieker, and the Warp Lightning Vortex. The top 3 have stayed the same month on month. However, the Warp Lightning Vortex has jumped into 4th, and I could only wonder if the popularity through the Kharadron Overlords has really given it the boost. Now, you might say to me, Anthony, how on earth can a Skaven endless spell come in to a Kharadron Overlords army, in fact? And that's because if you haven't seen this video in the past, or you haven't read the Kharadron Overlords book, you might not know that they have this artifact called Spell in the Bottle, where they can take any endless spell from any allegiance. So gives them great versatility on bringing things like the Warp Lightning Vortex, but any endless spell in the game. They do have to pay for it though, but it does provide a really interesting twist to the Kharadron Overlords. If you're not familiar with the Balewind Vortex, that is going to increase the range of your spell casting by 6 inches, as well as adding +1 to the save roll for the wizard on the Balewind Vortex. The Chronomatic Cogs has 2 different benefits. You can slow down time to basically increase your, you can add +1 additional spell to cast, and you get to re-roll the saves to the wizard. Or if you speed up time, you get to add +2 to the movement for everyone on the battlefield, so you and your opponent. And at the start of the hero phase, if you're within range of the Chronomatic Cogs, you get the opportunity to dial down or dial up, depending on what you think is important on the battle. The Bone-Tide Shrieker is a Ossiarch Bone Reaper, and it's going to do a whole bunch of stuff like add +1 to the hit rolls for the Ossiarch Bone Reapers in 12 inches, that is, and it's going to subtract 1 to the bravery for your opponents that are within 12. So it's a very cost-effective endless spell, and certainly obviously the most popular. Another one that I'll highlight that I found really interesting was the rise of the Emerald Life Swarm. So last month the Emerald Life Swarm didn't feature in our top 20, however you can see there that it's sitting in number 6. It was taken just under 100 times. Now the Emerald Life Swarm is an interesting one. I believe it's 50 points from memory right now, and what it does is it allows you to heal D3 wounds or return D3 amount of wounds back to a unit. So if it's a single wound unit, you could bring back up to 3 or D3, obviously. However, if you're playing in Gairan or you're playing in Cities of Sigmar, you would get to use that dice roll as a D6. So I know I personally love it with my Phoenix Guard. Phoenix Guard are very hard to take down. They have a natural 4+ armor save, and then they have an additional after save as another 4+. And then, you know, if I cast the Emerald Life Swarm, I could bring back D3 or D6. So very, very, very sexy if you're someone like me. Other than that, from the Allegiance-based endless spells, you can start to see we've got the Chalice coming out of the Flesh Eater Courts. We've got Hexgorger Skulls and the Wraith Axe coming out of KHORNE. We have the Nightmare Predator from the Ossiarch Bone Reapers. We have the Stormcast Eternal's Everblaze Comet, always popular. Maybe a little bit overcosted at 100 points, but it is still very popular. It does a lot of damage. You've got the Glade Worm coming out of the Sylvaneth. You've got the Darkfire Demon Wraith coming out of the Slaves to Darkness. And as other popular choices from Blind Sorcery, we do have the Umbral Spell Portal, the Prismatic Palisades, the Aether Void Pendulum, Purple Sun, Geminids, Suffocating Great Tide, the Quicksilver Swords, and the Soul Snare Shackles. Got that one correct for the first time. It's a bit of a tongue twister. But these are the most popular endless spell choices, and obviously they do various things depending on what's important to you. When we look down and drill down a little bit further to see who is taking these, we can start to see that again, the Balewind Vortex, Chronomatic Cogs, Emerald Life Swarm, and the Umbral Spell Portal are the four most popular choices. And who are taking them? Well, the Balewind Vortex has been taken by Seraphon, taken by Tzeentch, it's taken for the Ogre Moor tribe. So Tzeentch definitely wants that additional spell cast to get those summoning points. The Seraphon again wants to get those summoning points so they can bring on some sexy lizards, but again, who knows what the new battle tome is going to bring to us. And we have the Ogre Moor tribes, where often enough their army is rushing forward and the butchers can't catch up, so the the Balewind Vortex is a great way to keep the Butcher close to their Maw Pot, or being in range to tap into their Frost Lords on Stonehorns or their Thunder Tusks. The Chronomatic Cogs are coming in again: Seraphon, Nighthaunt, and the Ogre Maw Tribes. So you can again see the Ogre Maw Tribes might be looking for the +2 movement. Nighthaunt is probably looking for the +2 movement, although they can benefit as well from the additional spell. And Seraphon want that extra spell, so they want to slow down time as opposed to speed up time that the Ogre Maw Tribes want. The Emerald Lifeswarm is being chosen by Tzeentch at 33.7. Cities of Sigmar want it at 30.6, and NURGLE want it at 5.1. So I mentioned earlier why Cities of Sigmar want it. One great example is the Phoenix Guard. But you might want to bring back things like healing back your Hurricanum or your Luminarch or your Griffin or your Frost Phoenix. The Tzeentch wanted to bring back wounds, especially things like the Lord of Change, which are very, very important to things like the Change Host Battalion. So you want to keep that big bin chicken healed up as much as possible. And NURGLE, I don't really know why NURGLE wants it, but probably because when we get to the unit choices and things like that, we've started to see a bit of a shift on how NURGLE is building their armies, and they're going down towards more of a Blight King build as opposed to a Plague Bearer build. So Plague Bearers only have 1 wound, while these Plague Bearers, we'll get to it. You'll see it all. But long story short, I can see some use of NURGLE, but you can see why Tzeentch and Cities of Sigmar are dominating here. Finally, the Umbral Spell Portal is taken by Tzeentch, Cities of Sigmar, Ossiarch Bone Reapers. If we dug down Cities of Sigmar a little bit more, you could probably see that Hallowheart wants it even more. I've spoken in previous months about the Elemental Cyclone spell, which does a whole bunch of mortal wounds to Horde armies. So Cities of Sigmar absolutely loves that. Although there are some other cities that do enjoy the Umbral Spell Portal, probably just not as much as Hallowheart. Your Tzeentch definitely wants those extra spells you have to cast through the portal. And the Ossiarch Bone Reaper one's an interesting one. I haven't actually seen an Ossiarch Bone Reaper player use the Umbral Spell Portal, so if you are one of these players, I'd love to know what you're doing and why. I can only imagine it might be under a build with Arcane the Black, and getting some spells around the board. But again, I'd love to hear your feedback. I haven't actually seen an Ossiarch Bone Reaper army use the Umbral Spell Portal. Drilling down even more, let's go into our allegiance-based stuff. So what were the most chosen battalions in February? Well, the Iron Fist is definitely going to be popular between the Iron Jaws and the Big WAAGH. Lords of the Lodge from a Fyreslayer's point of view. And 2 new entries in February is the Change Host and the Gun Stock Escort Wing. So Change Host is coming to you out of Tzeentch, and the Gunstock Escort Wing is coming from the Kharadron Overlord. So if you don't remember last month, what does the Iron Fist do? The Iron Fist does, basically it allows you in the hero phase to use Mighty Destroyers, which is an allegiance ability from the Iron Jaws. You get to use it for free. So basically what Mighty Destroyers does is you would normally spend a command point and friendly Iron Jaws units within 12 inches of the hero or 18 of the general. Basically, you get to either move, you get to either charge, or you either get to immediately pile in and fight. So depending on if you're within 12, outside of 12, or you're within, you're within 3, there's a whole bunch of ranges that you can dig down a little bit further. So nothing scares me more than an Iron Jaws, especially like a Maw Crusher and all the Gore Grunters, or a double Maw Crusher, piling in the hero phase and fighting, and then fighting me again in the combat phase. Then you can make that even worse if you happen to get double turned by said Maw Crusher and Piggies. So they can do a lot of damage, so getting that ability for free essentially without spending a command point is super crazy good. Lords of the Lodge is going to be buffing up your Hearthguard Berserkers, so it allows you to pile in and attack twice in the combat phase as long as they're within 12 of that hero from the battalion. So not usually hard, because normally those Hearthguard Berserkers are hanging around their heroes. They don't move very far, and usually they take a lot of heroes to support those troops. The change host being a new one into the entry coming out of the new book, although anyone who's played Age of Sigmar for a while would remember the change host from the old book, and it is very much around movement shenanigans. So you can pick up a unit and redeploy it around the board so long as it's outside of 9 inches from an enemy model. So your traditional redeployment and you know your deep striking rules. So movement's super important for Age of Sigmar. And being able to redeploy and remove yourself from a bad situation and put yourself into an advantageous one, or maybe noticing that an opponent has moved off their objective and basically drop a unit on top of that objective. And it can be very hard for an opponent to respond, makes the change host an incredibly strong battalion. The escort wing coming out of the Kharadron Overlords allows you to essentially do this quote-unquote focus fire. So basically, at the start of the shooting phase, you get to choose an enemy unit and you get to re-roll ones to hit for all of the units in that battalion. And I think you can take up to like 3 or 4 different ships and all this cool stuff that happens in the escort wing. So they have a whole bunch of shooting, and often they're high damage or they're high rend. So being able to re-roll hits of 1, you're essentially getting, you know, 3 or 4 command points that you would normally spend out of a battalion ability. So that's pretty good. Outside of that, out of your other allegiance-based battalions, you've got the Gore Pilgrims and the Tyrants of Blood coming out of KHORNE, which are popular. You've got your Chain Guard coming out of Nighthaunt. You've got your Mortex Shield Corps and your Kavalos Lance. So if you want your little death ponies, that one is kind of emerging. We saw it do well at CanCon with about 25 of those murder ponies. So keep an eye out on that one. You've got the Blightsist coming out of NURGLE. You've got the Goremand, the Earlbad, and the Butcher's Band coming out of the Ogre Moor tribes. You've got the Ardfist that is beneficial to both Ironjaws and Big WAAGH. You've got this Shadow Strike Star host for Seraphon, but again, I've mentioned there's a new battle tome literally coming, you know, any moment now. So who knows what the Shadow Strike Star host is going to look like, if it's even still around. You've got the Supreme Saborites coming out of Slaanesh. You've got the Squig Rider Stampede, represent for my Gloomspite Gits, all about the Squigs. You've got the Cleansing Phalanx coming out of the Stormcast Eternal. So a lot's going on. You can start to see there is some dominance, but again, they've got a lot of versatility and variety on the builds, and you can start to see that some of these armies, you know, prime example of the Ogre Moor tribes, there's no one single battalion that's really dominating. It's actually spread out between the 3. And you know, looking at some of the penetration rates, it's very interesting to see that, you know, almost 50% of the Fyreslayers are taking Lords of the Lodge, which is crazy, right? That means 1 in every 2 Fyreslayers armies is taking this one battalion. So you can see that if you don't know about the Lords of the Lodge ability, you need to learn about it really quickly. The Ironjaws, almost 40% of the Ironjaws armies are taking Iron Fist. And it's probably around the same number if we were to look at the Big WAAGH as well. Again, Iron Fist is very, very popular battalion. Some of the other penetration rates is the Grunstock Escort Wing is 1 in 4 Kharadron Overlords list at 25%. The Change Host at 24%, although I imagine it will go up unless people start kind of holding back. It is a really, really, really strong build. But you have to be a demon army. So if you want to play the Zangor style Zench armies, Change Host isn't for you. However, imagine and expect that Changed Host is going to be quite strong, at least in the short term. Slaanesh, again, 24% going into Supreme Saborites. 21%, we don't talk a lot about Beasts of Chaos around here. Not that I don't like Beasts of Chaos, but we don't see a high representation on the table. But what we do know is that 21% of all of those Beasts of Chaos armies are taking the Desolate Beast Herd. What's really good about that particular battalion, by the way, is if an unmodified hit roll is made, and if you're in your enemy territory and you roll a 6, you get to score 2 hits instead of 1, so you get to double your attacks essentially for 6 rolls. That's pretty good. A couple of others is that Gloomspite one, which is the Squig Rider Stampede, which is going to allow your Squigs to re-roll their movement. Now, you might be wondering, if you've never played Squigs, why is that important? Well, it is important, and it's important because all Squigs have a random movement. So you get to roll 2d6 or 3d6 or 4d6 depending on the type of Squig. And there's been times where I've rolled a 4 on using 3 dice. So having the ability to re-roll that movement dice is super important. The last one, which is the Flesh-Eater Court's Ghoul Patrol, is one that you used to see in the olden days. You haven't quite seen it in the Rise of Grizzlegore. However, it is a nice little ability because it does allow you to basically, you've got to take 3 units of ghouls as well as like a ghoul courtier. And what you do basically is you get to set them up on the flanks of the table on any board edge within 6 inches, wholly within 6 inches of the board edge. So being able to block off any maybe some deep striking, or being able to kind of seize objectives early does give you some good movement shenanigans, while you might have some nice juicy strong stuff like your Terrorgeist or your Zombie Dragons in the center of the board. The most chosen ally choices in February were again, no surprise, is the Funkoid Cave Shaman. You've got Gotrek, you've got the Vampire Lord, and you've got the Corpse Cart. So the Corpse Cart one was an interesting one. We haven't seen that one pop up recently. Gotrek is around because he is an absolute destroying machine. He is super durable, he's hard to take down, and he hits like a Mack truck. So people are taking him to potentially handle things like your Slaanesh, things like your Ossiarch Bone Reapers. If you're in order, that's a good choice. Your Fungoid Cave Shaman remains popular because it is a command point generator. You get to generate a command point on a 4+, so that is really good. I think he's like 90 points right now. So if you can generate 2 command points, maybe even 3 command points, he's paid himself back tenfold. He's got like a resilience save as well, so he gets an after save. His spell's okay, but if you think about that, he can generate additional command points. That's a good investment. Your Vampire Lord's coming in, and it's usually coming in to help death armies, and specifically what it does is it allows you to add +1 melee attack to a friendly death unit within 15, and it also flies. It's got a heal. It's generally pretty supportive, and from memory, it is a good ally choice for the Nighthaunt. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but there's definitely, if you think about, I'm pretty sure it's in Nighthaunt, he comes in as an ally choice. He won't get his Deathless after save of 6+, but if you think about putting on a +1 melee attack to some of those real hard hitters in Nighthaunt, that can be a very, very, very good ally choice. The last one is the Corpse Card, and specifically with the loadout of the Unholy Lodestone. And the reason people are taking that is because, again, in Death, you get to add +1 to the casting roll for Death Wizards that are in the army that are within 18 of the Corpse Card. So it's very much like the Celestial Hurricanum in Order, but basically it's going to make your cast a lot easier. So +1 to cast can often be the difference between getting that spell off and not getting that spell off, or making that a little bit harder for your opponent to unbind your spell. One other call out that I'll make in our top 20, there's certainly some really great choices in there. You know, your Gyrocopters, your Horrors of Zench, you've got your Gyro Bombers, you've got your Aetherwings, your Skinks, your Tree Revs are wonderful choices. But the call out that I'll make there is the Rise of the Untamed Beasts. So that is a Chaos-based ally. And the reason people like to take that is because before the game commences, but after deployment, you get to move that unit 6 inches before the game starts. If you're worried about an army alpha striking you and dropping from the sky, or teleporting and getting in your face, or even charging you, that +6 movement or that free move could make it a little bit harder and make it a little bit further away from your great targets. Or you're basically sacrificing them, and then when it's your turn, you get to strike back. So a lot of different combinations there with the Untamed Beast, but that's a really good call out from the Warcry game. So do consider that if you are a Chaos player. Speaking of trying things new, we're going to try something even more new. So again, I'd love your feedback, I love your thoughts, and this time I'm going to show off some different highlights from regional differences in army composition. So the meta is important, and the meta is common across the globe, but also there's local meta, so what happens in your games club or your friends and your family. But you've also got these regional metas that happen in a country. So I know in Australia, a lot of people talk about the Australian meta being a little bit different, and there's a lot of reasons why, but I thought I'd highlight 3 key areas where there might be differences between the regional metas. So The first one I'll show off is the favorite units across the meta. So what's going on here? We can see the United States, they are loving the Mortek Guard right now. You can see the United Kingdom is going for the Chain Rasps. You can see Canada is going for the Gore Grunters. Australia, I'm super disappointed at you guys. You bring shame to my family that our favorite unit right now is the Horrors of Tzeentch. Germany is going with the Chain Rasp Horde. Spain is going with Chain Rasp Horde. Sweden's an interesting one. They're going with the Puskoy or Blight Lord. So the Black Kings riding on those big ugly fly things. The Sequitors coming out of France, and you've got the Netherlands with the Ard Boys. So in some of those European countries, they do have that magazine, the Mortal Realms magazine, where you're getting free models such as the Stormcast and the Nighthaunt. So I do wonder what the impacts are of that Mortal Realms magazine. But it's quite interesting to see some of the differences within the meta between the different countries. Looking at the endless spells that are coming out of the different countries, whoa, we've got some commonality here. We've got the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, and Spain are all loving the Balewind Vortex. You've got Australia, who are loving the Purple Sun of Shaish. You've got Denmark, who are loving the Umbral Spell Portal. You've got the Swedens coming out of the Emerald Life Swarm, and then finally you've got Poland, who are loving the Chronomatic Cog. So there is some commonality there. If you're not running a Balewind Vortex, it might be worth reconsidering your choices. I do know from Australia the second highest endless spell choice was the Balewind Vortex as well. So you could almost say 6 of those 9 were coming from Balewind Vortex. And then finally, the different artifacts across the world. You got the Ethereal Amulet coming out of United States, United Kingdom, and France. Australia is going for the Aether Quartz Brooch. We've got Canada, who's going for the Sunblessed Armor. So you're starting to see that in Canada, it looks like Orcs are very strong, or Orcs are very popular, aka the Ironjaws. You've got the Ossiarch Bone Reapers Godbone Armor from Petrifix Elite coming out of Spain. We've got that Soul Thief artifact coming out of Poland. Really interesting to see that Sylvaneth, an army that is not quite popular right now. I know a lot of people, when their new book dropped about, I think it was about 9 months ago, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, I think Seraphon players were generally disappointed. I don't think they got what they were after. Yet Seraphon looks like in Germany they are big. And then finally, consistency across Sweden. Looks like NURGLE has taken over Sweden. So make sure to take your antibiotics if you go into Sweden, because you do not want to get the NURGLE plague. Finally, we're going to deep dive into the top 5. Now, the top 5 is not changing very often, so I thought I would spare yourselves to go through the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and the Stormcast Eternals and some of the things that we've gone through again and again and again. If you are interested in seeing something like the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and you want to see how they're built, I'd highly recommend you look at one of our previous videos. But I thought I would show off some of the different armies right now that are emerging that you might want to consider. And if you are playing one of these armies and you're looking at how to go from a mediocre or an okay performance and really tweak and optimize your list so you can do really better at your next event, some of these insights may help you get there. So I'm going to show off 5 different armies that are basically, I'd say, in the middle. So the first one is KHORNE. KHORNE has kind of dipped in the meta of late. However, there's a little bit of a resurgence. Now, this is the KHORNE data. If you are interested in KHORNE, please pause it, screenshot this, and obviously come back to this. I'm only going to talk through a couple of the key points, but there's obviously a lot to unpack here. A couple of those quick call-outs that I'll make is one, from a sub-allegiance point of view, the Reapers of Vengeance is the strongest coming out right now, and Reapers of Vengeance, it kind of makes sense. Reapers of Vengeance is an anti-magic sub-allegiance, and there's a lot of magic going around right now. You've got the endless spells, you've got the Rise of Hallowheart, you've got the Rise of Tzeentch. We have pointy elves coming down, who knows when. You can only imagine they're going to be very, very, very strong magic players. But magic is quite strong right now, so being anti-magic and punishing your opponent is a good choice, especially because KHORNE doesn't cast spells. A couple of those key call-outs why Reapers of Vengeance is really good. One, their artifact, which is that Skull Shard Mantle. Each time the bearer is affected by a spell or an endless spell, you roll a dice. On a 2+, you get to ignore the effects of that spell, which is pretty awesome. Put that on a Bloodthirster, put that on a really important a Blood Secretor or Slaughter Priest that you really need in your army. On a 2+, you're ignoring spells. That's pretty good. The command trait, which is the Mage Eater, basically the general can attempt to unbind one spell in the enemy hero phase as if they were a wizard. But if your dice roll to unbind is an unmodified roll of 8, not only is a spell unbound, the caster is going to take d6 mortal wounds. So psychologically, that could just stop people from casting because they don't want their wizard to die. Or if you do pull it off, often enough, d6 mortal wounds could be the difference, and it could pop a wizard, or it could put them on 1 wound, and I'm sure you could pull a blood tie out and kind of do some damage there. The Hexgorgeous Skulls, which is a endless spell or a prayer, that's boss. I remember playing a game with Doom and Darkness, and it killed a whole bunch of my Grot wizards who only have 4 wounds. It is an absolute beast, because not only do wizards in range get a -2 to their cast if they're within 12. There's like a -1 or a -2 depending on if they're in range of 1 or 2 of those Hexgorgeous Skulls. But also, if you roll an 8, you are going to take damage as well. So they're often being moved around in pairs, and they can do some serious mortal wounds to wizards. The Gore Pilgrims as a battalion continues to remain popular, and you can see the impacts of the Gore Pilgrims battalion in the unit selection. So Gore Pilgrims is a mortal-based KHORNE army. So you get to take a Blood Secretor, Slaughter Priest, Blood Warriors, Blood Reavers, and one of the big benefits that it does is it allows you to increase the range of the Blood Secretor's abilities to an additional 8 inches. So which can be pretty good. And then when you imagine, you can see in the unit choices, the Blood Secretor, the Slaughter Priest, the Blood Reavers, the Blood Warriors are all the highest selections, followed by the Bloodthirster. So again, quite popular. However, the Bloodthirster of Incessant Range, from memory, it lets you allow you to pile in 6 inches. So if my memory is working correctly, if you are worried about something like Slaanesha's Always Fight Last, the Bloodthirster of Incessant Range, if it does have the 6-inch pile in that I remember, is a one way to get around that, because you're not going to be in range. So super popular to build those models right now. And so again, there's a lot you can go through here and unpack, so feel free to pause this and look up some of those rules in your battle tome. The next set of lists that we're going to look at is the SKAVENTIDE. So the SKAVENTIDE, Skaven is a funny one. They got a really strong nerfing, or like they got some rules impacted when it came down to about a year ago. Their vortex, the warp lightning vortex, got a bit of an ability reduction, and then most recently, not long ago in the December FAQs, you did see the Plague Monks get a reduction as well. So I think Skaven players are looking around to see, are Plague Monks still a great choice in their army, or do they need to build around things differently? And you did see Plague Monks are still very popular. They're the 4th most popular choice, along with Clan Rats, the Grey Seer on Screaming Bell, and Storm Fiends. But you may have seen in months prior that Skaven Plague Monks were probably a lot stronger and more chosen they were. So a couple of quick call-outs that I'll make on top of that is you've got the Congregation of Filth, which is the highest chosen battalion. You can see there that battalions aren't that popular in Skaven. It's one that they don't need, but of those battalions that they're choosing to get that ability, the command point and the artifact, the Congregation of Filth is the one that people are choosing, and you've got to take a Plague Priest on a Plague Furnace and at least 2 units of Plague Monks. And what you get for that is you get to roll a dice. So every time you roll a dice to allocate a wound to the Plague Monks while they're within 18 of that Plague Furnace, on a 6, they get to negate that wound. So Plague Monks are not durable. When they die, they do fight you back. So being able to negate those wounds on a 6 can be quite useful. And then if you do get through the 6, they're going to hit you back anyway. So it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Just got to shoot them off the table. Do not engage them in combat. The second one I'll call out is the artifact choice. So the number one choice there, the Vigor Dust Injector, which comes from Clan Scryer. In the hero phase, the Skaventide unit holder within 12 gets to add +1 to their charge and their hit rolls in the next hero phase. But the return is going to be that they take D3 mortal wounds at the start of their next hero phase. So it's almost like you're setting up for this really big, I'm going to kill you and do lots of damage, knowing that in the next turn you're going to take a bunch of damage. So make the most of it when you do use that Vigor Dust Injector. The last call out I will make is going to be around the Master Clan's Master of Magic. And that's a command trait there up in the top middle, and what that does is allows you once per hero phase to add 1 to the casting, dispelling or unbinding roll from your Greyseer or whatever your Master Clan choice is. So again, very good if you want to put down that Lightning Vortex. You want to be able to do some things like, you know, more war power, or is it Death Frenzy is another really popular spell in the Skaven book. Being able to add +1 to cast, spell or unbind is very sexy. And again, the Warp Lightning Vortex, we've talked about it a few times now, still remains very popular, even though it did get a bit of an ability reduction. The third list we'll look at is the MAGGOTHKIN of NURGLE. The reason we're calling this army out is because they got a real boost in the Wrath of the Everchosen. NURGLE has not been quite strong for a while. They've kind of been around. They did have like a bit of a build for a while with, you know, 3 Great Unclean Ones under the Thricefold Battalion. They did flood the board often with Plague Bearers, but NURGLE has kind of lost a lot of love for a while. And, you know, it was an older style book and they kind of fell a little bit out of touch of the newer books. Now, Wrath of the Everchosen has kind of brought them back up, and one of the big things that it brought was sub-allegiances. These sub-allegiances weren't available in the old NURGLE book, and I know NURGLE players have been very excited. And if you are a NURGLE player and you are excited, put them in the comments section. I'd love to hear what's going on. But those sub-allegiances from my friends and people in my communities, they are loving it. And the ones that are really standing out for me is the Blessed Sons and the Drowned Men are the ones that I'm hearing about. But the Blessed Sons is the one that's the most popular sub-allegiance based on February. And the reason it is that there's a couple of benefits. One is all about the Black Kings. I mentioned earlier that the Black Kings have seen a resurgence, and the FAQ that happened in December, they made some changes. One of those big changes is they do mortal wounds on a 6. And from memory, you could essentially negate that with a -1 to hit. In the FAQ, they made that so that the Black Kings, it was on an unmodified 6. And then when you add all these additional benefits from things like the Blessed Sun, so basically the command trait, the command ability, which is called Disregard and Defiled. So basically you get to pick a Blessed Sun Rotbringer unit that's wholly within 12 of the hero, and at the end of the fight phase, pick an enemy, and it deals some mortal wounds. You know, so there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do there. So, and things like the artifact where you can reroll saves. You've got things like the Blight Cyst, which is a battalion that allows you to have rend -1. So you get in Black Kings who are doing mortal wounds on 6s, and then they're doing rend -1 for their other attacks. And then the Wither Stave, which is a very popular artifact, not only here in NURGLE, but it was one of those top 20 artifacts that we spoke about earlier in the show. The Wither Stave allows you to re-roll hit rolls of 6 for enemy units within 12 of the bearer. So straight up, you're making your Black Kings even more resilient by making it harder for them to hit. So very interesting time with NURGLE. Obviously, they've only had Wrath of the Everchosen now for a couple of weeks. It has only been recently FAQ'd, so it'll be interesting to see how, with practice and time, these NURGLE lists are going to evolve. The fourth list we're going to talk about is going to be around the Big WAAGH. The Big WAAGH is starting to make its impact on the tournament scene. It hasn't gotten a lot of love recently. Now, I say that, and Big WAAGH players are going to say, but I've been playing Big WAAGH for ages, and, you know, kudos to you. Most people are talking about the Ironjaws, and the Big WAAGH has really gone under the radar. Not to say that hasn't been played, but it just hasn't gotten a lot of popularity, and I think because it's a little bit different. And one of the big reasons that it's different is because the way it works. And the way it works is the big WAAGH essentially accumulates points over time based on the actions on the game and the way you build your list. So it's a little bit different to the Iron Jaws, Iron Sun, the way they're building their list. But what makes it really interesting is basically you accumulate points over the game. And unlike other point systems in the game, let's say the blood tie, where you accumulate blood tie and then you spend them, you never spend your big WAAGH points. And basically the more points you accumulate, the better your army gets. So a prime example is when you accumulate 8 big WAAGH points, you get +1 to your charge rolls. So that's pretty good. When you accumulate 20 points, you get to add 1 to the wound rolls for melee attacks made by auric units. So that's really good. Again, added on a Maw Crusher, on Gore Grunters, added on your big stabbers. That can be quite potent. But it is a little bit harder to play, and I think that's why we're not seeing as many big WAAGH players, because it is a little bit harder than, say, an Iron Jaws unit or an Iron Jaws army. But the beautiful thing as well is you get to combine your big WAAGH with both Iron Jaws and Bone Splitters armies. So you get a good variety, and you can see that the unit selection is quite diverse. You do have your Iron Jaws, you've got your Ard Boys, you've got your Gore Grunters, you've got your Maw Crusher with your Mega Boss, or Gordrak itself. But on the flip side, you've got things like your War Doc, you've got your Prophet there, you've got your Weird Node Shaman. So you do have a combination between the Iron Jaws and the Bone Splitters, so you get the best of both worlds. The Balewind Vortex from the Endless Spells is important and popular here, and it's a great way for things like your War Chanter or your War Doc to impact that very fast Orc kind of feel. So a lot of people are building around either Gore Grunters or Maw Crushers. You might be running around with Brutes and Ard Boys as well, which is fine. But that Balewind Vortex just allows you to stay, away from harm. And still impacting the game via the Balewind Vortex. The other call out that I'll make here again is at the Iron Fist Battalion. We did talk about the penetration rate being around 40% in Iron Jaws. It is popular here in the big WAAGH as well. And that's going to allow you to do that Mighty Destroyer's command ability at no cost. So again, a lot of cool stuff here. You got the Fist of Gork spell, which is super great. You've got, there's so many great things here. If you are a Auric player, I would challenge you to say, go explore the big WAAGH. It is a lot of fun and it is different. And if you are getting tired of Iron Jaws, this is a nice way to flip it around and bring in some Bone Splitters as well. The last one we'll talk about here is the Flesh Eater Courts. Now, there's two main reasons I'm going to talk Flesh Eater Courts. One, because the dominance of Grizzlegore is starting to wear off. People are sick of playing Grizzlegore, and I think they're looking for something else. And selfishly, the second reason is that I recently recorded Faction Focus on Flesh Eater Courts, and I know people were very excited to see how do I build Flesh Eater Courts outside of this Grizzlegore with Terrorgeist build. And what's great here is to see there's a lot of diversity here. From a battalion point of view, you've got the Ghoul Patrol and Dead Watch, which are very, very popular, which don't rely on Terrorgeist, that don't rely on Zombie Dragons. Dead Watch is going to allow you to bring in all the Flayers, while Ghoul Patrol is going to allow you to bring all the ghouls in. So lots of different abilities between those two particular battalions. The Arch Regent, the Abhorrent Arch Regent, a big call out there because this particular model used to be an exclusive model that was only available in a limited edition box set. I think it came out last year, and there was a whole bunch of those models actually. There was a Squig one, there was a Sylvaneth one, there was a whole bunch of them. But anyway, recently this model is now available on the Games Workshop website. So it is a great hero, it is a very good support hero. In fact, some Flesh Eater Court armies are taking 2 of them because he's that good. And one of the big reasons is that he can summon either 20 ghouls or 3 knights. So that's horrors or flayers. Or it can bring on a courtier as well. So, and if you're hanging around the terrain piece that you get from your Flesh Eater Courts, you don't have to spend a command point as well to do that. So bringing on 20 ghouls is a great value when you compare the points that you pay for an Arch Regent. Plus, he's obviously a hero. Plus, he can cast magic. Plus, he does other stuff. The last one I'll call out is the Endless Spell Choice. And that Chalice is a great choice. The chalice is almost like I would never leave home without that chalice, and the reason I would never leave home without it is because once you summon the chalice, you get to count all of the models that are slain within 12 inches of the chalice. Now what happens is at the end of the turn, you count up all those wounds and you roll a dice, and on a 4+, you get to heal a wound, or you get to return a model with a wound characteristic of 1. So I could bring back a whole bunch of ghouls. I could bring a terrorgeist, who's partially or almost killed, back to almost full health. I could do a whole bunch of stuff. So that chalice, for the points, I think it's 40 or 50 points. It's worth its weight in gold. But there's some very interesting ways, and you can see the command abilities that are taking up the most love are going to be the summoning of Imperial Guard and the summoning of the Royal Guard. So they're bringing on those knights, bringing on those men-at-arms, bringing on those Imperial Guard. So not the 40k Imperial Guard, by the way. Please don't bring those lasers to Age of Sigmar. But there's a whole bunch of things that they can do and summon, and that terrain piece is just gold. So, a lot going on. I would love to hear what your thoughts are around some of even the new data sets that I've brought to the table. As always, I want to thank everyone on my Patreon list who have kicked some serious ass and are keeping this channel alive. So thank you guys, Dwight, Tyler, Reflex, Dog, Houseborn, Max. You guys know who you are. Thank you very much for your love and support for keeping this thing going. If you guys are looking at a great tool to learn your rules and understand how to play your army, and make sure you don't forget a rule at a tournament or in a games club, or get the right behaviors, AOS Reminders is the place for you. It's a free resource. It's how I get the data, but more importantly, it has made my life, and people who are learning their armies or just want to get that muscle memory going, it is a great resource. So I'll leave it here and ask you, what do you think? How is the meta working around you, either locally, whether it's at a tournament that you've been to recently? What are you preparing for? What do you think is either going to be emerging, or what do you think that we've predicted has emerged? Or maybe a prediction that I've made in the past that hasn't actually emerged just yet. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Put it in the comment section below. Thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed to this channel already, I would appreciate if you press like, you press subscribe. Actually, smash it. Smash the like, smash the subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your family, put it on your resume, do what you need to do. I hope you find this valuable. As always, happy wargaming. Get back in there, roll all the sixes, and don't forget to shoot the characters.